anytime, any day. Why not right now? Stop looking up to your boss and start being your own boss. Don't work for paychecks. Work for dreams with no regrets. This is Cracking the Entrepreneur Code. If you have the passion, we'll create the blueprint. Now, your host. You know him from his 7 tips to build the business you always wanted, and now you're about to hear a lot more. Jack H.M. Wong.
Welcome to another episode of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code podcast show. And by the way, this is not another episode because this is part two of my interview with Dr. D. Anthony Miles. I call him D. And the reason why we are doing this part 2, if you remember part 1, was the fact that D is actually teaching cash flow in university. So I said, okay, D, can you do another part of your interview with me to explain your experience arising from cash flow? Because the cash flow quadrant, as suggested by Robert Kiyosaki, this is the first time I heard that, is a very important model. And I love to have guests over from different parts of the world to share their experiences, because I remember Robert said, well, go and study the cash flow quadrant, but at the end, it is how we draw the lessons out that helps us understand exactly this model. So that is the whole reason why I asked D, would you be able to share with us your experiences in this part? So D, thank you for agreeing to do part 2.
Thank you for having me, Jack. So nice to be back.
So from your experience, can you share with us once again what you have been doing on the cash flow quadrant?
Okay. On the Cash Flow Quadrant, in an excellent book by Robert Kiyosaki, I've been teaching it in MBA programs and entrepreneurship courses. And I kind of dabbled with it in marketing, but it's primarily for entrepreneurship and startup courses. What I do is I explain the basics of the 3 type of business models, or the 3 type of businesses according to the Cash Flow Quadrant. And I talk about those things, and I talk about why some entrepreneurs get into the game and fail, and they don't understand the ugly truth and your mindset. And I talk about those different things. And I talk about why the cash flow quadrant is very important for anybody to know that's trying to start a business.
Okay. What was the driving force or the reason why you decided to introduce the cash flow quadrant concept to the entrepreneurship program? Because I remember when I was the university students, no one actually talked about that. So why did you decide to do that?
That's a great question, Jack. One of the reasons that I decided to implement some of the theory or some of the concepts from the cash flow quadrant, is because I have to really be honest with you, Jack. The people that teach entrepreneurship in most college programs either never started their own business or currently didn't have a business or had never been in business for themselves. So they're teaching people to do a business, and they can't really relate to people because they have never started a business. And that's one of the tragedies of colleges and universities. There are very few entrepreneurs or actual entrepreneurs that actually teach entrepreneurial concepts and theories. So take this in consideration. When you have someone telling you about trying to start a business and they never put their head out in the jungle and started a business or knows what the problems are that you experience, that's a really, really short-sighted type of advice that they can give you. If somebody's got a PhD and they never never started their own business, they never started their own consulting practice, that can be a problem. And that's one of the problems that we have with the universities. The universities are big on academics, but they're basically weak on the practitioner side. And a lot of these colleges and universities, to overcome that, they bring in people that actually have their own business and have them come talk about their business and teach class. Why can't you just start your own business and bring other people in to help solidify some of the things that you're teaching? So that's the problem that I had when I was teaching. So when I would teach this, I would tell students things based on my experience. Like when I started my corporation, how the U.S. Patent Office and Trademark Office rejected my application. because I had to. There was a company with a similar name to mine in a totally different industry, and they wouldn't approve it. So I had to come up with some more money to get my C corp going. Those are things that you can't really teach out of a book. That's something you guys got to experience.
Yep.
So that's basically what the issues that we have with how they teach entrepreneurship and business in the colleges and universities.
So before we dive into the cash flow quadrant model, I will just want to add some observation to make sure that it's just to be fair to the university or the faculty members, because number one, like a lot of people I heard, they said traditional education system is not good. These teachers are not giving themselves the chance of have a taste of the real world experience, or what they are teaching is textbook. But from these talking just now, and my own exposure, my own experience is that there is universities actually do acknowledge this issue, and it's not every single subject where they will have the professor who is very good on textbook knowledge to teach the subject. Like examples, like you teach entrepreneurship, I teach taxation, and both of us go to university to bring our real experience to school to share with the students. So it's not fair for university to be penalized or labeled as all the whole bunch of professors, they are all textbook readers, they are all the bookworms, they don't have the real world experience, therefore never go to university and do not learn from them. So for me, it is like, because I'm a faculty member, so I kind of feel a pinch of salt whenever the universities are being labeled as such. So I want to take this opportunity just to say my piece to let the world know that not all university faculty members are like that.
Well, absolutely. And I was just trying to make a point, and the point is we have to take the practitioner and the academic, and we have to maximize the knowledge of both.
Yep.
Because I think if it were reversed, you had people just talk about starting a business and they don't give you a background on it, that's almost as bad. So I think what we need to do, I think the model that we need to have for universities in the future is we need to maximize the practitioner side and also the academic side. But if you have one without the other, I think it's one-dimensional.
That is a very, very fair statement. So thank you, Dee. So now let's dive into the cash flow quadrant. So can you just share with us the basic meaning of this concept of cash flow quadrant?
Absolutely. The cash flow quadrant is basically the theory by Kiyosaki and I think Lecter. Basically, the cash flow quadrant is 4 boxes, and on the right side on the left side of the boxes is an E that stands for employee. The S stands for self-employed, and the B on the right side stands for business owner, and I stands for investor. And those are 4 different business models, and how people think and everything comes from where they are in terms of entrepreneurship. And what a lot of people, I think, find fascinating or find something that they didn't understand is even though you're an employee, you're still an entrepreneur because you work for a system and you're making money for somebody else. Okay, so you're an entrepreneur, but you're selling your time for dollars.
Right. So it's not like the end of the world, even though I may start from the employee quadrant. It's the mindset or the way in which we generate the income, which can be different from, obviously, from other quadrants. So for employees, like most people will start the career as an employee after they graduate from school. What would be the main challenges for these people in terms of creating wealth?
This is one of the major challenges with employees. Employees have a mindset of they grow up, go to school, get a degree, and get a job, retire. And that's a paradigm that came through the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution put emphasis on being an employee or having a job and getting a paycheck rather than like the 1800s where you had to go out and market your skills and services, and you're basically more of an entrepreneur in the 1800s. So when the Industrial Revolution came, it created in America, and I know around the world, America created a mindset that, okay, it's easy for me to get a job than to be an owner or have my own business. So when the Industrial Revolution happened, we had all of these manufacturing companies They came and manufactured goods and services, and so they created an employee mindset. So when you're an employee on that type in the employee quadrant, you value two things. You value security, and you value minimize risk. And want to get to the education thing, if you go to school and get your degree and you're preparing yourself for the workforce, you basically value security, okay, and a steady paycheck. That was another part of it, because you cannot, based on how you're structured in terms of being employed, you cannot and will not take a chance on having a business, because you need something solid. You need something stable. So they value security over freedom. They kind of stay away from risk, and they look for a job, instead of looking for opportunities, they look for jobs.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the difference when you have an employee mindset. And then here's the ugly truth. For you to be successful at anything, you have to recognize that when the Industrial Revolution went under, now we're in the digital revolution. So now we have a paradigm shift. So now a college degree is a commodity. The internet has made college degrees less valuable and made college degrees, I'm not going to say obsolete, but anybody can go to the internet and get knowledge based on what they're looking for. And in the old days, because you had a college degree, that kind of gave you somewhat of a competitive advantage, because you went to school and studied your craft. So when you went to school and studied your craft, people didn't have access to the books that you read in school. People didn't have access to some of the materials that the professor shared with you. So when the internet came along, it kind of trumped all of that. That's why you see in the job market, when people apply for a job, there's about 60 to 70 people applying for a job, and there's people with MBAs applying for a job, because they're still living in the old paradigm, which is the Industrial Revolution. A college degree is not as valuable as, say, it was 20 to 30 years ago. So when you're an employee and you stay in that quadrant, that means that you value security and a steady paycheck over opportunities and freedom.
Interestingly, when you say that these people value security, it could be the case that they don't have any choice. They are forced to the corner to only value security because there's nothing else they can value. So, let me give you an example as to why I say that. I've started a new semester of teaching taxation. So at the introduction, I asked these students, what gives you the idea of coming to get a university degree? So majority of the class actually said, well, the reason why I get a degree is I want to have a better job. I have a moment of silence. Why do you say that? Wanted to have a better job? Because the current job is not very good, and I don't really like the current job. So are you thinking of changing another job? Are you looking for a higher paid job? So is that the reason why you pursue a degree? That is the answer that one of the students gave me just 24 hours ago.
Oh, wow.
I'm
When I was teaching in the university, I ran into that a lot. Yeah. Wow.
So to me,
goodness.
Well, on one hand, I give credit to the students for pursuing something, to pursue further knowledge. And on the other side of the coin, I feel sad, because if that is what they charted their life, they can't see what we see. They will be forever stuck in the employees quadrant, because to them, I just want to move from one job to another so-called better job. So I'll be rotating the rat race cycle in the E quadrant. So it's pretty sad.
Wow.
When people see something that we began to see a while ago, so they have this idea of getting out of the rat race, which you remember I said this is a group of audiences I'm serving. So chances are they will get out of the job and own their job. So can you explain a bit more about the self-employed? Because now they don't work for other people, but they work for themselves. Is that a cool thing to work for themselves?
Well, yes, you have to. I believe that when you say move from the E quadrant to the S quadrant, working for yourself is a start. It shouldn't be your end game. And I'll share an interesting story with you.
Sure.
When I got my doctorate, my PhD, I had a different mindset. And my mindset was this. I said that I want to build my consulting practice, and I want to build a $1 million consulting practice. I want to find a niche out there that no one else was doing, and a niche I could get clients with because I have credibility. And I remember, I'll share an interesting story with you, Jack, kind of go along the lines of the story you told me about your class. Well, my professor was my advisor. Okay. He said, I'd like to meet with you. So we had a meeting. See, he asked me, what do you want to do when you get out of school? I'm telling you the truth. What I said to him, I said, I want to be a millionaire.
Wow.
He looked at me. He said, what? I said, yeah, I want to be a millionaire. He said, I don't think that's reasonable.
Oh,
I said,
boy.
why is that? Well, because he said something to the effect of, that's not realistic. I said, well, he says, you need something more solid. You need something more stable. I said, well, I want to be a millionaire, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen. And he said, okay, shook his head, and we talked some more, and then that was the end of the meeting. And that really got thrown up in my face about people that live in the E quadrant and think in the E quadrant. Because in something else, Jack, that we don't talk about too much, and I know that both of us I'm a former educator and you're an educator. The purpose of colleges and universities are to create a workforce for businesses.
Yep.
Colleges and universities they weren't originally set up to teach you to be an entrepreneur. So when my professor, my advisor, told me that, he was approaching that from that old paradigm: get a college degree, get a secure job, retire, and that's your life. And the problem with that is that old paradigm doesn't work anymore, because a college degree now is a commodity. And because it's a commodity, that means when you go apply for a job, people have their pick of employees, and it's been like that for a reason. That's why you always apply for a job. You're competing with people around the country, people that graduated from top universities, people that graduated from not so top universities or B schools. And he has this pick of employees. So if you think having a college degree is more of a competitive advantage, you need to think again. And I remember reading an article in Forbes when I was an undergrad student, and I was getting my BBA in marketing. I remember it was an article in Forbes, and I remember the title of the article. It kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. The title of the article was The MBA Glut. And I forgot the author who wrote it. I think you can still find that article. It came out in the 80s. And what this guy said was, the MBA is going to be like the law degree. There's too many lawyers. There's more lawyers in law school than there's lawyers actually practicing law. So he said, we have people getting MBAs, and MBAs had to be specialized. It used to be just had an MBA, which is a general business degree. Now MBAs have a focus. Now they have to have a focus. They have to have a niche. And what the author said, I forgot his name who wrote the article, he said that the MBA is going to be the new law degree. That really got my attention.
Okay.
Really got my
Interesting.
attention.
MBA is
Absolutely
the new law degree. Okay.
It's too many lawyers.
Yeah.
So if somebody say they have an MBA, you can throw a rock and hit about 10 people. Seriously.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Sounds like a depressing show, doesn't it?
Yes. What I'm hearing is, again, because there are just too much supply in the market. So at the end,
Absolutely.
That becomes commodity. So people who are in the self-employed quadrant, the one big issue that I always notice is those consultants, those coaches. Like I'm part of a coaching community on Facebook, and one question was raised by one coach, and he asked the question, it's like, if there are so many coaches in the market, where do I get my job? Where do I get my client? So I said, That is a very interesting question, because there are just too many coaches and consultants in the market. So it's not very good news by being a self-employed. Moving out of the E quadrant to S quadrant, we have another set of problems. So from your experience, what are the challenges of people who are self-employed?
That is a great question. And that kind of goes to what I was going to talk about. And when we talk about people that go to the S quadrant is people that are really self-employed, people who, their mindset is, I make this per hour. I have this contract and I have that contract. And the problem with when you're an S is you're all alone. And because you're all alone, there's more risk involved. And when there's more risk involved, you're responsible for the business. So when people most of the logical progression for people that want to get out of the entrepreneurship quadrant is to go into the S quadrant. So when you go into the S quadrant, it's like this. You're frustrated with the job, and normally this hits you in your 40s. I've seen this happen over and over. It hits you in your 40s. You didn't get that promotion, your career projection didn't go as you wanted, so you're frustrated. So you say, well, hell, I'm going to start my own business. So you go into the S quadrant, and you're not prepared to be an entrepreneur, and this is where some people crash and burn. Okay, when they go into the S quadrant, they say, okay, I'll be a consultant. Consultant is a generic word just like coach. I never liked the word coach.
Yep.
It just always bothered me. Now, another issue that ties into this, like we have a lot of people getting PhDs in leadership. Well, leadership is the ugly stepbrother of the management side. Okay, so now we have people trying to build consulting practices on studying leadership and helping companies with leadership, and it hasn't kind of panned out because one, people don't understand it when you say, I'm a consultant for leadership. This is in the S quadrant. Okay, so I always tell my friends, don't say you're going to help people with their leadership problems. You tell people you help them with management problems. Okay, then you pivot to leadership because leadership is kind of nebulous. When you say management means hardcore things like performance, employee, workplace bullying, dealing with things with the culture, those type of things. But when you say leadership, it confuses people. So we got a bunch of people getting doctorates and PhDs in leadership, and that's flooding the market with people trying to get clients saying they're leadership. I've heard all kind of leadership coach, leadership guru. And like I said, I never liked the word coach. Coach to me connotates sports. And I just never liked that term when you talk about
personal preference. Yep.
Yes. I always say a coach of what? Okay, what do you have experience building teams? You have experience building groups. So when we go to the S quadrant, that's the logical progression from the E quadrant. S quadrant has the attitude of nobody does it better than me. And also the S quadrant, this is where your doctors, your lawyers, your consultants, your attorneys, people of that sort. It's a professional field that builds a business based on their profession. Okay, so most people, they build their apprenticeship in the E quadrant, so they go to the S quadrant. They build their reputation, and these are the people like the doctors, the lawyers, or the attorneys, or the consultants, or the also CPAs, because CPAs actually. What I liked about people that are CPAs like yourself is it builds you those skills to be entrepreneurs. Okay. In school, and when you study business in school, the accounting profession is actually sort of similar to the medical profession. It builds your skills to actually be an entrepreneur as opposed to the other business majors. So that's what we have here. So when you go when you get into the S quadrant, the singularity of it means everything runs through you. You are the system of the business.
Yep.
And the problem with the S quadrant is this: your system your system is in place. So every client that doesn't pay you, that takes money out of your pocket and money off your table. So it's a problem. So anytime that you do everything yourself and you have an inability to leverage your time, that's going to be a problem.
Yep.
So the S quadrant is almost as risky as the E quadrant.
So people say that, well, the difference between the E and S, well, it's just a matter of why either you work for other people or work for yourself. And the joke of saying that is right. Yeah, and the joke of that is like you do not have a job, you actually own a job.
Absolutely. I heard a guy actually say this. You just bought yourself a job when you started your own business. You bought yourself a job.
Yeah.
You bought yourself a job where you can't pay yourself.
Yeah.
Okay?
And also something very interestingly I observed from my consulting practice is there are consultants who are worried about charging their clients. So let's talk about a bit of the the mindset of charging clients. Because the mindset of employees, they work for time, they actually trade time for money. So now the consultants are working by themselves. So now a client asks them to do some work and asks them what is the fee involved. The consultant said, well, Let me see how many hours I have to do it so that I will charge based on my hourly rate. So as far as I'm concerned, what is the difference between you as an employee versus you as a self-employed? Because you are still charging your amount by the hours or by the time.
Absolutely.
So your income will
Right.
always be linear, proportionate to the amount of time you
It's
spend.
still linear.
It's
still linear. Right. It's not passive. It's still linear. You work 1 hour, you get paid 1 hour, right?
Exactly.
And that's it. So it's still linear. And then the other issue is when you're being a consultant or a person that's a solo entrepreneur, which is an S, the other issue is you have to understand the dynamic of the way consumers think. Consumers shop on two bases. Consumers shop on value and they shop on price.
Yep.
And the people that shop on value don't care how much your consulting fee is. They're going to pay it because they value your service. People that shop on price judge your business or your service based on price.
Yep.
And price people is like, why do some people go to Walmart and some people go to Neiman Marcus? It's on the basis of value or price.
Yep.
So the issue is when you're in a solo entrepreneur being an S, you may have a commodity type of practice or consulting practice that people can go anywhere. So that makes you have to compete on price. Okay. And when people have to compete on price, the consumer always wins every time. He can say, well, I talked to such and such. This is what they charge, which probably isn't true. But he's going to tell you that. So to scare you, you lower your prices, or because you want to get the client, and then you lower your prices. Yep. And then you lower your prices, get the client, and you find out there's more work involved than you anticipated because that's usually the problem, isn't it?
Yep.
So, yeah.
It's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle.
S's also do this, Jack.
Yep.
S's also bid for government contracts. And S's, when they respond to RFQ, they have to consider what their rate is, and that's where they get you every time. Because government contracts, when they approve contracts, sometimes they want the best price, not necessarily the best value.
Right.
So if you take a contract and lower your price, and say your rate is $350 an hour, and to get the contract, you cut your rate about $100, so it's $250 an hour. Then you get the contract, then you realize that all the work they're asking you to do is really, really more than you thought you could handle originally. So now you're at a loss. You can't quit the contract because you took the contract because you lowered your rate, so they got you.
And
so
talking about the RFQ from the government contracts or from the government bodies, one interesting thing I noticed, like at the very beginning, when I started my consulting practice, with the view to looking for clients, then obviously I went to the government website and see whether I can source for any contract. And the funny thing about this government contract is that you could have a few people bidding for the job, and eventually, like you said, the one with the lowest price usually will win. But what is even more interesting is that the one who will win the bid will be asked by the government agency and say, "Can you look at this scope of work?" Which is actually the one bidding the highest price, to give you the scope of work, and can you do it at your price? Oh my God. How can I do
that?
That
Happens so many times.
Yeah.
And they have a term for that. They call it, I think, scope creep, when they try to sneak in other projects to you for that low bid or rate that you offer. And they end up making you tap out because they got you for a bargain. And also, I don't know about how it is where you are, Singapore. I know how they do it in the United States. Sometimes the United States government, if you had a government contract, they don't pay you for 90 days.
Ooh.
Okay.
Oh.
So absolutely. Ooh. And if say you get a contract being a contractor with buildings and building buildings and all those type of things. Well, if you got guys working for you that you're a subcontractor work out to, and they invoice you or pay you on an invoice 90 days, you better have the cash flow to cover those 90 days. And if you don't, you're not going to be able to do that contract.
Right.
And they don't usually tell you that up front. So you can get mad, scream and holler. Their standard operating procedure is not to pay you for 90 days. And some of them, if you're working on a $2-3 million contract and you don't get paid for 90 days, unless you have a bank that you have a line of with, or you have a special relationship with your vendors, it's most likely you're setting yourself up to fail. So when you're on the left side of the quadrant, which is the E and the S, everything in terms of, the S is you're the system. Everything is price defined. Everything is defined by price.
Yep.
And because you have a commodity type of consulting practice that people can shop around, you're always going to lose because you got to compete on the basis of price.
Yep. So I got this. So what we are saying is that people living in the E and the S, they actually have to trade their time for money, and the income is linear. And another term I recall for linear income is active income, meaning that they do have to put in hours to generate the income. So that's active.
To continue cracking the entrepreneur code, subscribe for more episodes and download the Amazon bestseller, Cracking the Entrepreneur Code, 7 Tips to Build the Business You Always Wanted at crackingentrepreneur.com. Learn more about author and host Jack H.M. Wong and book your 30-minute discovery session to overcome any professional challenge at jackhmwong.com/apply.